I think I'm on. Good morning, everybody.
Adrian, do you want to stop sharing your screen really quick? We'll introduce everyone.
Sure, I was ready to go.
You got it. Good morning and welcome to a special edition live chat, the Colorado Department of Corrections, The Road Ahead. I'm Rebecca Fuhr. Today, our executive team will be sharing key updates, including legislative developments, the fiscal year 24-25 budget, our priorities for the next fiscal year. We'll also cover progress on our wildly important goals, updates on our WIG and labor relations, and then wrap up with a very special presentation on the launch of our cultural assessment survey. As always, we invite you to send your questions in, but to keep things focused and productive, we'll only be answering questions directly related to our topics today. All other questions will be moved to our next regularly scheduled chat on July 8th at 3 o'clock. To kick things off, I'd like to welcome our Executive Director, Andre Stansel. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Rebecca. Good morning, y'all. I'm going to be brief in my comments because we have a whole lot of information one, I want to be the first to say, this is something that we should have done a lot sooner because there's been so much work done. There's been so many things that has happened. We've tried to keep everyone updated through the monthly chats. But a lot of times we don't get to talk about the wins. We talk a lot about some of the negative things. We try to stay question driven and focus on the questions that are asked. But I also, when we're talking about planning this, we also feel it's important to take a break from the normal routine and just kind of talk about some of the things that are going on in the department and some of the visions we have for next year. There's a long list of things that I could talk about, but there's an agenda and we're going to stick strictly to it. One of the things I do want to talk about now, though, some of you may have seen the article where the El Paso County Sheriff is being very vocal now about the jail backlog. And he has a good reason to. The jail backlog is probably the highest that it's been since I've been in the department. I don't know what it is today, but I know we're over 600. And when I talk about jail backlog, those are the individuals that are in county jails that are waiting to come to DOC. And I won't take up a lot of time by going into the long process of how that happens. But the basic boiled down version of it is, one, we have to have beds in the department in order to take these individuals in from these county jails. And when we don't have the beds, and of course we can't bring them in. And when they're sitting in the county jails, there's a fee that is paid from the state to these county jails, which is a little over $77 right now. And what Sheriff Roybal is saying is that fee is too low. Well, that fee is not set by us as the DOC. That fee is set by JBC in a very condensed version of it. There's a whole lot of math that goes into how that's set. But basically, we pay what JBC budgets us to pay for inmates that are in county jail. So when you see those articles, and the sheriff did a very good job of not really attacking the DOC. He's attacking the issue itself and not DOC. And that's not a fix that DOC is able to provide. That's something that's going to have to come from a collective group of the DOC, the Gov's office, the JBC. So I won't take up much more time than that. But if time allows, I will have some closing remarks. But if not, Rebecca, then I want to thank everybody for joining in now. But Rebecca, we'll go ahead and get started to make sure we do have enough time for everyone.
You got it. I'd like to welcome the Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs, Adrian Sanchez. Good morning to you.
Good morning. And good morning to everybody who is tuning in this morning. So thank you for doing so. I'm experimenting with technology, so if it doesn't work, that's technology's fault. Again, I'm Adrian Sanchez, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs, and I am going to do the legislative session in 15 minutes or less. So first, 733 bills were introduced in the 2025 legislative session. To put that in perspective, that's about, I don't do math, 705 were introduced in 2024. So if anybody thought that there were more bills this session and it felt busier, you would be accurate. There were more bills this session. Of those 733 bills, there were 77 bills that I personally monitored for DOC impact. There may have been additional bills that were sent to us in what is called canvassing that would have been sent to us to look at them for fiscal impact. Some of them impacted us operationally, and some of them ended up being issues that were not related to our operations or didn't have fiscal impact. 77 bills remained on my list for review throughout the session. Of those 77 bills, 50 of them have now cleared both houses and have either been signed by the governor or are in the process of being signed. And these will be the bills that we will be tasked with implementing going forward. That means roughly 27, using my bad math, bills hit what I call the graveyard this session, which would have been through either direct efforts in lobbying between our efforts or in collaboration with the governor's office, and or through this year we saw a lot of bills that died based on fiscal impact due to the budgetary constraints within the state. So in order to kind of cover those 50 bills, I have effectively designed, some of you may remember the top 10 lists of days of yore. For those of you who don't, David Letterman created top 10 lists in my mind, and this top 10 list is not going to be anywhere near as funny, but I think it'll be informative. So I effectively rated the 50 bills in terms of the top 10 bills that I think are going to be the most impactful for the department in terms of their impact to the department, either operationally or fiscally for the next year. Coming in at number 10, Senate Bill 25-263. There were a handful of bills that came directly out of the Joint Budget Committee. After our hearings, they made a lot of policy changes this session, which is a little bit unusual for the JBC, but I think it was a natural inclination for them this year, knowing that the budget was really, really tight and they needed to make significant budgetary cuts. And some of those required significant policy changes for not just Department of Corrections, but for other state agencies. And Senate Bill 25-263 is an example of that. This modifies the spending authority statutes so that it limits agency transfer authority between line items. Last year, we were able to utilize some of this transfer authority to impact some of our shortfalls in different line items. And this spending authority statutory change is going to modify and restrict the way that transfers can occur between line items. And it applies not just to the department, but to all state agencies. We got a little bit of a special dig there, indicating that any line items of appropriation in DOC that are not explicitly authorized in a footnote to the long bill would not be for like purposes. Transfers have to be for like purposes, and this bill enumerates what those are. Senate Bill coming in number 9, Senate Bill 25-267, eliminating roll forward authority on utilities line items. This is another JBC bill. Currently, any unexpended state funds in unexpended and unencumbered money in department utility lines can roll forward into the next fiscal year. This bill eliminates that roll forward authority and again applies to all state agencies. Coming in at number 8, Senate Bill 25-211, Department of Corrections budgeting reports. This bill requires us to provide some significant reporting directly to the Joint Budget Committee and to report as some of this in part of our SMART Act hearing. There are potential monetary sanctions for failure to do so. Number 7, 25-208, reduced cost calls. 211 and 208 are also JBC bills. This modifies an older bill, which was to have us paying 100% of the cost of inmate phone calls this coming fiscal year. This allows for us to scale that back a little bit and pay only 75% of the calls this fiscal year. It gives us an additional year to come into 100% compliance. Number 6, Senate Bill 25-209, offender refused community corrections placement, another JBC bill. Are you sensing a theme, perhaps? This bill changes the timeline by which inmates can decline placement in community placement. At this time, inmates can decline community placement prior to being accepted and referred. This changes that, flips it around. So refusal for community placement will now only occur after community acceptance. Going to the next set. Number 5, House Bill 251136, not a JBC bill. This is the Peace Officer Conduct Database. This is going to impact all of our peace officers and make several modifications to reporting requirements related to post-certification. Number 4, Senate Bill 25190, also not a JBC bill. Offender release from custody. This modifies some of the provisions in our special needs parole processes. And there's a note that we need to include some packets in our parole board information to ensure that our chief medical officer's decision also gets forwarded to the parole board for consideration. Number 3, Senate Bill 25212. This is a JBC bill. Temporary inmate transfer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to allow us to utilize portions of CSP2, affectionately known, Centennial South, in order to relocate individuals from Sterling to that facility so that we can complete significant repairs at the Sterling facility. This was a much needed project, and we are thankful that we were able to get this one over the finish line. Number 2, this one is a little bit different. This is actually an executive order which came directly from the governor after vetoing a bill that we worked on this session related to co-payments. We had negotiated a deal on inmate co-payment reform where the bill would pass and we would not be permitted to collect co-payments or fees. However, we would do some gathering of data and reporting. And if we were able to show conclusively that charging the co-payments and fees do actually have a deterrent effect on malingering and misuse of clinical funds, that the bill or the legislation itself would be completely repealed. That was entered into in the House, and in the Senate, they completely removed that provision without any knowledge, putting us into an opposed position at the very last second. So the governor actually did veto that bill and instead entered what's called an executive order, which is the governor directing us to take some action. And in this case, the governor is going to direct us to review and revise our co-payment policies, reduce co-payment charges, and create a data tracking system for any fees that we impose. Drum roll, please. The number 1 most impactful bill, in my mind, is the House Bill 251013, DOC visitation rights. Everybody should be keeping their eyes and ears open for lots of changes around visitation practices in the department. This bill was actually introduced on the very first day of the session, and we negotiated language on this bill throughout the entire session with a final agreement being made on the 2nd of May, keeping in mind that the session ended on the 7th of May. So this was a hotly contested piece of legislation. We sent something like 15 or 16 drafts back and forth between us and the legislators and advocate groups. What we ended up with is a bill that provides for visitation rights, not creating a visitation right, which sounds like semantics, but it is an important legal distinction. We also removed any sort of legal penalties related to any of our restrictions on visitation, and we were able to maintain most of our ability to utilize sanctions in the same manner we do currently. So looking ahead very, very, very quickly to next session, things that we need to be aware of for next session, we need to be watching our capacity. Capacity within the prisons is going to be a huge topic going into the next session. Relationship building. Building key relationships with JDC members and the judiciary team members is going to be important going into the next session and beyond. And the other thing to keep in mind is we are going into an election year, which is going to make things extra spicy at the Capitol. I am going to also switch gears super fast and do a quick update on our WIGs. Currently, we are on track with our WIGs for fiscal year 24-25. We have some lead measures that were not met at this time related to MAT, but we are continuing this particular WIG into next fiscal year. Our new WIGs have been approved by the governor's office and will be published in early September. Our recidivism WIG language has been updated going into 25-26, but our parole compliance language remains the same. Our staff retention WIG is also being somewhat changed, and we'll be focusing on hard to fill positions going into the next year. I do want to thank all of the facilities for the hard work they've put into our internal strategic planning, focusing on improving our internal morale, modernizing the department, and our external image. We have seen tons of progress internally. and we will be reporting out on that at a meeting on July 14th. With that, I hope I didn't speak too quickly, and I hope that I made it within 15 minutes. And I believe we are on to budget with Director Ashley Clark.
That is correct. All right. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you so much for the lead-in, Adrian. My name is Ashley Clark. I'm the Director of Finance and Administration here at DOC, and I'll be talking about the budget process, what happened this year, and kind of the road ahead. And this is actually kind of interesting because yesterday I had a sick child at home, and so we watched some old Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And one of the episodes was actually about the taxes in the kingdom. If you've never seen Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, there's his house, but then there's the kingdom, which is in the land of make-believe. And so they go to the land of make-believe, and it was all about taxes and the budget report. And they literally read the budget report in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And then they had leftover money at the end, and they talked about what they should do with it and how they could help everyone in the kingdom out with it. And not just one person, Katerina, who wanted brushes to paint the carousel. The point of it was it really warmed my heart to have that kind of civics education that I don't always see on TV every day. And then I finally got to tell my child that's kind of what I work on at work. So just pretend I'm not nearly as wonderful as Mr. Rogers, but just pretend I'm kind of taking you to this land to talk through what is Colorado's tax budget look like. So to start that journey, we really have to talk about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which most people call TABOR. And that was constitutionally approved by voters in 1992. And it basically limits the amount of revenue that the state of Colorado can retain and spend. So specifically, TABOR allows the state to retain and spend an amount based on the prior fiscal year's actual revenue or the limit, whichever was lower, grown by Colorado inflation and population growth, and adjusted for any voter-approved revenue. What that basically means is that we limit, here in Colorado, we limit the growth of the state budget. And anything that's over that cap goes directly back to the taxpayers. So you might have remembered this in the past few years, we've had a couple TABOR refunds. That's because the amount of money that the state has taken in has been above this constitutionally set limit. What does that mean in general for the budget over the next few years? So in FY 2019 was really the first year that we saw money over that TABOR cap that happened in the past 10 years. And ever since then, we're continually seeing general fund revenue that exceeds that TABOR cap. And we're predicting that for the next 3 fiscal years. So again, that means that more money is going to come to the general fund than they're allowed to spend. And so they'll have to give some of that money back out to individuals in the state of Colorado. What that also means is that we're predicting deficits. So even though the economy is strong currently, and even though the budget is growing, we're still expecting deficits. In FY 27, so that's the next fiscal year. Sorry, we are finishing up FY 25. I'm already thinking FY 26 and then FY 27. So in FY 27, we're going to see a deficit of $267 million. And what this table shows to the left are basically the potential deficit timelines based on whether we use one-time versus ongoing balancing measures, and whether balancing measures are subject to the reserve. So just to break that down, when we talk about one-time, it's just like in your budget at home. A one-time is going 1 month without eating out. I think we've all done that, where we said, all right, this month we are not eating out, we're not getting takeout. That's a one-time cost savings. Ongoing balancing measures or ongoing cost savings is, you know what, our house is way too expensive. We're going to downsize and we're going to get a house with a smaller mortgage. And that's going to save us money month over month. So you can see here in red is if we just do one-time savings, we are going to have increasing budget shortfalls. If we do instead on the green of ongoing savings, we're gonna decrease the deficits in the out years and even have a surplus maybe in FY 30. So again, the high level of this is that Colorado really faces a persistent deficit challenge where revenue growth, again, limited by Tabor, which we talked about, is often insufficient to cover baseline expenditure growth. And when we say baseline expenditure growth, we're talking Medicaid, K-12, education, but we're also talking about salaries. We're talking about caseload growth. So even in strong economic years, we still have this, what's called a structural deficit. Where does DOC fit into this? Well, we also are caseload driven, which means our budget is dependent on the number of people who are coming into our care. So the number of inmates we have. And based on the most recent DCJ, which is the Division of Criminal Justice, which sits in the Department of Public Safety, based on their projections, inmate population is expected to continue to grow year over year. And this will cause additional funding requests for bed use across the department, as well as with our private partners. These projections focus on the total number of beds needed, and the department continues to work to understand the needs at each security level and the population need. And what I mean by that is we're not just talking about a growth in number of beds we'll have, but we know that some of the people coming into our care have long-term medical needs. We have an aging population, and that's also increasing the cost to run our facilities and take care of the people we have. So again, how does this affect the Department of Corrections? So DOC has one of the largest state budgets and continues to have heavy scrutiny. It will continue to have heavy scrutiny as well in the next years as these budgets get tighter and tighter. DOC is also the largest employer of the state. I'm very proud of the fact that we employ 1 out of 10 state employees. And the vast majority of our budget is actually for personal services. And when I say that, I mean the vast majority of our budget is for our staff. And as that grows, as our staff continue to grow as well for those caseload needs, we're going to see more pressure on our budget around that. DOC also has one of the largest infrastructure footprints in the state, and our buildings are aging. I know if Associate Director Rhonda Vogerlinder was here, she would talk about how we have some of the oldest buildings in the state. Territorial is from 1871, and we keep that baby running and up to date. So it takes a lot to maintain our buildings. Again, we have 19 facilities all across the state. And then we also have our leased space in the form of the 19 parole offices, as well as headquarters. All state departments are being asked to review spending and really determine what is a critical need. So we're taking a magnifying glass to all of the things we spend money on and to see what we need and what we don't need right now. Growing in expenses will be tough over the coming fiscal years, and the department's going to need to continue to make these tough choices. That said, one of the things that we have been trying to protect is the vast majority of our budget, which again is personal services and which is our staff. The department continues to struggle with increased cost and inflation with, again, no additional funds. This includes items like food, clothing, maintenance, utilities, and more. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I talk about this because you all see this day in and day out on the front line, how we are spreading that peanut butter further and further without additional peanut butter. So I wanted to give some updates of what happened this legislative session and it's going to impact us and our budget. So first, the co-wins and statewide changes. So JBC fully funded some of the priorities outlined by the state and co-wins. And just to take a step back, there was the state and co-wins agreement that was signed. And then after it was signed, we figured out how big of a deficit challenge the state was having. So co-wins and the state got back together and they outlined what they thought was the most important parts for the partnership agreement to be funded and presented that to the JBC. The JBC then went ahead and funded these 5. So first was the STEP plan, including a 2% increase to pay plans. So the STEP plan is here for the next fiscal year. The second is the COLA increases, and that's the 2.5% across the board. Again, how that's going to be applied is that every individual is going to get the 2.5% across the board, and then they are going to be placed on the STEP plan. So if there's an increase based on where you are in the STEP plan, you'll get that increase. If not, then you get the 2.5%. They are providing full funding for the payroll modernization, which is necessary to continue to implement our step pay plan. They also funded a 1.0 FTE, which is a full-time equivalent employee. So it's one employee for the partnership agreement extension. And then they have 4% temp pay for nurses at CDHS and DOC only. And that's for next fiscal year. So starting July 1st. Additionally, the JVC approved an 88-12% split for employees for the premium increase for HLD. That's just a change from the partnership, which said it was 100% going to be covered by the general fund. So now employees will be paying the 12% of the increase for HLD. So the road ahead. The budget team is currently working on the implementation of the FY26 budget that will again start July 1st, 2025. Some of the notably approved items for the long bill for FY26 are small addition of male and female beds. We're going to see additional funding for CTA to maintain the class size, funds for maintenance for the recruitment and retention efforts of the department, funds for technology for inmate legal access services, and expansion of broadband to territorial, which is very exciting. And that is it from me. And I think I made it in my 10 minutes as well.
Great job, Director. Next up, we have our cultural partner, Joe Castaños, on our Cultural Assessment Initiative. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. And good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today to talk about the Cultural Assessment Initiative. So this initiative aims to foster an inclusive environment. We're focusing on promoting understanding, development, and most importantly, correctional professional safety. As we move forward, think about how a supportive culture can impact our day-to-day activities. It's not just about policies, but creating an atmosphere where everyone feels valued and understood. Before we dive into the core of the initiative, I just want to take a moment to introduce some key players with this initiative. First, we have Jessica Statz, our culture coach. She's been a valued member of the CDOC family since June of 2022. With her background in higher education administration, she brings a wealth of knowledge that truly enriches our mission. And her favorite hobbies are translating, she's fluent in Spanish, researching, and drinking lots of espresso. And I am proud to be serving as your culture partner. I joined the CDOC family in November of 2022, and I bring with me a strong background in communications and branding. And my fun fact, I love solving Sudoku puzzles and spending time outdoors. So as we dive into the evaluation of cultural competence within the CDOC, it's essential to understand the profound benefits that this initiative brings. To name just a few of the things that we're focusing on, enhancing communication is critical. Clear and effective communication fosters trust among team members and paves the way for more effective collaboration. Also, consider the increase in job satisfaction. When staff feel valued and understood, their overall job experience improves, leading to a more motivated workforce. And professional development cannot be overlooked. By investing in our people, we're not only empowering individuals, but also strengthening our organization as a whole. So let's work together to ensure a thriving environment for everyone involved. And as we delve more into what cultural competence is not, we think it's crucial to clarify just some common misconceptions. First, this initiative is not a punitive measure or an evaluation of individual staff performance. We're focusing on collective improvement and not placing blame. Secondly, it's also not a one-time event. This is an ongoing process and a journey that we're excited to embark on together to foster a more inclusive environment. We'll be visiting every single correctional facility and parole office before June 30th of 2026. Lastly, it's important to note that this effort is not solely focused on any specific cultural group. We're aiming for a broad understanding that encompasses all perspectives. So let's take a moment just to quickly outline the phases involved in the Cultural Assessment Initiative. First, we prepare. This phase is crucial as it allows us to gather insights and understand the current landscape of a correctional facility or parole office. Next, we conduct a thorough assessment. This step will help us identify strengths and areas for improvement by evaluating our current practices and policies. After that, we complete a comprehensive analysis of both qualitative and quantitative data based upon statistics, field observations, and the interviews that we conduct during the cultural assessment. And finally, we need to have a follow-up process in place. This ensures that we're not just making changes, but also monitoring our progress and making adjustments as necessary to our processes and procedures. So as we move forward, let's embrace this vital endeavor together. It's essential that we at the Colorado Department of Corrections commit to championing respect and understanding for everyone. This isn't just a goal, but a shared responsibility that requires our active participation. So this is your call to action, not just for today, but as an ongoing commitment. Each and every one of us plays such a crucial role in creating a respectful environment. So we're really excited. Together we can foster a culture of understanding that benefits not just our team, but everyone that we serve, our communities, and Colorado as a whole. I've listed our contact information on the screen there. So if anyone has any questions or would like more information, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that presentation there. Next up is our Associate Director of Training, Dave Lindsay.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be with you today. There have been a lot of exciting and new changes to training and staff development over the last couple of years, and I just wanted to give you a brief update on what has happened and where we're going in the department in these areas. Now, I don't have any slides for you today, as you have probably already seen enough slides from myself or CTA over the years, so my comments are going to be kind of brief. Now, in regard to training and staff development, while there have been some opportunities over the years, we realize that they have not always been consistent, they were not always sustainable, and they were not always timely for everybody within the department. And about a year and a half ago, the department began deliberately looking at the department's training program in order to determine if our current processes and structure are sufficient and effective to meet our changing needs. And so while it was clear from the feedback that what you wanted was training, and the number one type of training that had been passed on to us was training in regard to staff development, followed and second by job-specific training. So based on the feedback and your input, the department has made some critical changes to the training program. And these changes were mainly focused on increasing recruitment and retention, as well as creating opportunities for all staff and for staff development. Now, the first thing was, in order to maintain the relevancy and our effectiveness in training, the first thing the department decided to do was reimagine how onboarding and basic training was provided to new staff. Now, under the new BT model, and some of you may have seen our graphic, the roadmap on DocNet underneath the training tab, new staff are onboarded at headquarters on day one and then go through an in-person defensive tactics. Then they return to their locations for about 2 weeks for what we call onboarding essentials training. And during the 2 weeks in the facilities, the staff receive about 5 days of core instruction, which also includes ASHI, Kia dual control, foundational principles, and many other areas by the facility training coordinators or other staff. And then 1 week of on-site or what we call shadow training and orientation. Upon completion of then those 2 weeks, they report back to CTA for the final 3 weeks of basic training. And since the program's rollout in September of 2024, the feedback that we've gotten from new staff and existing staff has been very positive. They really appreciate the opportunity to see where they will be working, to be able to make connections and meet folks at their facilities and locations of where they'll be reporting after basic training, and that it gives a lot of context and relevancy to the training, again, all following on adult learning best practices. While we continue to make changes and modifications to the program based on your feedback, this is a significant step forward, and we really believe that it helps prepare our staff for a career as correctional professionals within the department. Now, the next thing that we looked at, another area was based on feedback, was in regard from the transition from basic training to working in a facility full-time. And many staff had mentioned that they felt that they were thrown the keys and left to kind of figure things out. So this doesn't mean that there weren't effective FTO programs throughout the department. There absolutely were. However, there was a trend that it was not always consistent, oftentimes not prioritized consistently throughout the facilities, and it often left out many critical areas. So what was being developed by a working group is what will be known as the Employee Development Program. And it's envisioned that this new program will replace the existing facility FTO programs and designed to cultivate a culture of continuous learning, professional growth, and collaboration. So details are still being finalized as the program is being developed, but the vision is that when a CO is promoted to sergeant, they will then attend a 2-day training that focuses on being a mentor and a lead worker and to best prepare them for their new responsibilities. So checklists and additional support will help the sergeants guide the new staff in this program and make sure that there's a consistent process to train the new staff. A lot of the information that was used in the development of this program was taken from best practices in existing FTO programs throughout the state. So many of the things that are being implemented have already been tested and proven to be effective. Now, over the next several months, we'll be providing additional information to everybody regarding this program and the timeline for rolling it out. And while this will initially be focused on the CO1s, we will be looking at potentially expanding it to other classifications in the near future. So then, based on the feedback that we had mentioned before, that there was a desire for staff development training, we know that one of the biggest challenges that organizations face with new supervisors is equipping them to be successful in these new and challenging roles. And simply promoting someone because they had done well in a prior role does not mean that they are going to necessarily be effective with those same skills in a future role. So last year, the department applied for and was selected as the only state to participate in a first-line supervisory pilot to help the Bureau of Justice Assistance to develop a training curriculum to support new supervisors. So you should begin seeing training courses for this at your facilities and locations, and I believe some of them have already occurred last week. If you haven't, please reach out to your management teams or the training coordinators about details. We believe that the training and the impacts of this will be felt immediately and will help cascade throughout the department in a very positive manner. Now, one point I want to highlight is that this training is separate from the 2-day HR training that is currently going on. So if you can kind of consider the HR training and this first line supervisory training is like a part 1 and a part 2 for new supervisors. So 4 days of training for new staff, and we're really excited about that. Now, so hopefully what you're seeing is that the department is investing heavily in providing relevant, timely, and consistent training. Now, you know, as well as what's been mentioned with the budget from Ms. Clark and everything, that there will continue to be constraints in regard to staffing and funding. However, that doesn't mean that we can't continue to look for new ways to develop and encourage our staff. And so while significant advancements have been made, we understand that this is a journey and we'll continue to look at additional opportunities. And two that I wanted to point out, one was regarding retention coaches. As many of you have maybe be aware, we're piloting retention coaches at some of our most difficult to fill facilities. And this was an initiative that the department started to help support new and existing staff and also be a bridge between management teams and staff in enhancing and supporting the culture at facilities. The feedback so far on this has been extremely positive, and great information is being shared. Staff are being supported, and the department is more effectively being able to understand and therefore create processes to create and meet the needs of all staff. And we are currently working on collecting and presenting and visualizing trends so that we can help collect the data so that we can potentially request additional funding from the legislature to expand this at other locations. And then finally, hopefully, as you've seen, the Department of Personnel Administration has implemented a new learning portal called LXP. And this is in addition to the SOC Learns portal, where most of the annual DOC training is already accessed. And if you haven't signed up for an account yet, please do so, as some mandatory online training from DPA is through this. But one thing I wanted to point out, there is a lot of training, free training that is available through this portal, whether it's snippets of 2 to 4 minutes long or week-long training classes. These are things that are available to you right now to access from as a state employee from your state computer. Now, what the final thing is I just wanted you to know that we are listening to and continuing to listen to your feedback and ideas. In multiple working groups, I wanted to point out that these were not CTA only driven opportunities. These came from everywhere, from the executive team to CEOs and working groups have been developing these to try and give you what you need. And again, we wanted to make sure that these are all sustainable. And in order to do this, we are kind of doing the old, what they say, taking one bite of the elephant at a time, so that each of these builds on each other. So we're really starting with the reimagined basic training, to a standardized employee development program, to new training and to support our new supervisors out there. And now we're looking at what those other opportunities and classifications we can support. And as always, we're here to support you in any way possible, and we want to make sure that we're giving you meaningful and relevant training. And I just appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for everyone's support and suggestions and ideas over the last couple of years. And turn it back over to you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Mr. Lindsay. And thank you to all of our presenters today. Great work today. Director Stansel, I'll give you some final thoughts.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. So this is the first event of this type. So what I would love to have from everyone is some feedback. Are we talking about the topics that you want to hear about? Are there topics that you want to hear about that we didn't talk about? Is the format, is it the best format? Are there any recommendations? So please give us feedback, because when so much has happened, with this being the first one, and so much has happened in the 3 years that this administration has been in place, it was hard to determine what to talk about and what not to talk about. So if you want to give us that feedback, if you want to improve this, because we're always trying to improve, please exercise that voice that everyone has, and make sure you let us know what you want to hear. So, Rebecca, were there any questions?
I see no questions today. Nope. Any questions that we had that were not directly related to the topics that we talked about today are moved over to the July 8th live chat.
All right, well, sounds good. If there are no questions, that's all I have.
All right, I'll close it out here. We hope today we gave you updates and clarity and perspective and renewed sense of purpose as we continue to move forward together. Again, please join us on the July 8th at 3 o'clock at our next regularly scheduled live chat. Thank you again, and here's to the road ahead.